Oi, oi, all right, how's it going? I'm Grant, your you. This is the Doodle Review coming through, as it's that time of year, once again, with a ton of lists. This is my first video in a series as we move through the end of 2024 that's going to run you through the best of this year. This year, the way we're doing things is like this. You're going to get a top 10 list across a few different categories, starting today with rock. These are like my top 10 honorable mentions, let's say. These are the records that in this genre are great or super enjoyable, maybe not quite good enough to make the main list, which is the top 50 albums of the year, which is coming. So if you see this top 10 and think, oh, but you know, it doesn't feature Joe Shit the Ragman or whatever, like just keep your eyes peeled for the definitive top 50 of the year, which is coming soon. Before we get into it, though, just to let you know, I have playlists for every best of list you'll see on this channel. There's a Spotify playlist linked in the description that takes you from 10 to 1, as well as quarterly playlists that cover a song from every album I listened to during each 3-month period this year, all sequenced into hours and hours worth of music. Check them out. All right, let's get into it. Laura Jane Grace is the guitarist, principal songwriter, and frontwoman of punk band Against Me. Hole in My Head is now her second solo release, containing a number of simple one acoustic guitar, one voice productions, interspersed with a couple of like full band upbeat numbers that span big bopper rock and roll, power pop, and even a kind of like avant-garde Alex G type track. What's interesting is despite the addition of the full band arrangements, the album maintains a feeling of intimacy throughout. It uses simplistic production that's quite dry with little discernible overdubs, with most instruments performed by Grace herself, drums and all. I'm generally quite apprehensive towards like acoustic folk punk stuff, but while Grace plays into the earnest and often literal storytelling tropes common within the genre that I tend to struggle with, this doesn't ever come at the expense of a really strong melody. And throughout the year, that is what's kind of kept me coming back to this one. There's some stuff I'm iffy on, like I'm Not a Cop, where I really respond to the anti-authority lyrical theme and frantic ad-libs, but the Barbaran-esque vocals just kind of give me the ick. Overall, though, this is a straightforward, lightweight, and enjoyable folk punk record with decent doses of stripped-back, outright punk to keep the energy up. At number 9, in Hindsight, the rollout of this collaboration between Oasis frontman Gallagher and Stone Roses guitarist Squire was maybe a little rushed and squeezed in at the top of the year in order to make way for the former's big reunion announcement. And it feels like this record came out way longer than a year ago at this point. I mostly stand by my initial thoughts that it would have been cool to see this record, lean a little further into the more interesting aspects of its lead artist's prior work. For all of the middle of the road songwriting of Gallagher's solo work, it has had some really interesting production. And when I think of Squire's work with the Roses, I think more Manchester than I do blues rock, which is what we have here. Nonetheless, though, if you like your 60s, 70s British rock like The Who, The Stones, or the Jimi Hendrix Experience, not technically British, but was in that scene, if you like that stuff, this record is a really fun revival of it from two legends that know what they're doing. VOWS came out this year. It was Hot Water Music's 10th album, released in their 30th year of being a band. Overall, I felt this record was a bit of a mixed bag. Some tracks were a touch bland, kind of sepia toned with sentimentality like Much Love and Bury Us All, but we also get some absolute bangers like Remnants and Chewing on Broken Glass. Hearing Chris Cresswell of Flatliners in this band continues to be a joy as well. His elevated position on VOWS is absolutely a highlight for me. On the previous record, Feel the Void, we were only treated to one song featuring the songwriting and singing of the snarling but melodic Canadian. And while it was certainly a highlight due to it being, a one-off, it kind of felt like a guest spot rather than being truly part of the band. Here on VOWS, Cresswell gets way more time in the spotlight, leading on 2 of the 12 tracks, and as an even surer sign of the guitarist vocalist's full immersion into the band, he actually duets with the core vocals of Reagan on the opener Menace and Burn Forever. Get into this if you haven't already, and if you still haven't, do yourself a favor and check out Flatliners too. This new one from Alkaline Trio, while I wasn't always down with the production choices. It did blow me away with the tight, punchy performances throughout, especially with the artifice of that Blink reunion still kind of echoing in my head. This album's tenor tracks played at what feels like a live tempo was just incredibly refreshing. And I actually was lucky enough to catch these guys live this year at Kentish Town Forum, and it was one of my favorites of the year as the band seemingly just maintained that momentum from the studio into the live setting. My initial review was a little lukewarm on some of the songs in this set, but I have to say, over the course of the last 12 months, I've found myself coming back to this for fun quite a lot. I probably still stand by some of the criticisms I made, but the fun definitely wins out here. Hot for Preacher, Versions of You, Scars, Teenage Heart, bangers. So I recently put out my review of Knocked Loose, their latest, and it left me asking myself, was I too hard on it? Someone quite rightly pointed out in the comments that you won't go before you're supposed to. With this record, Knocked Loose, dropped a crazy heavy album that's managed to gain some sort of mainstream momentum. And despite that, I still didn't give it above a 7. And I think that's a fair criticism. But my score was slightly deflated and came from the critiques of the guitar tone on this album, which I'll stand by and say I think they still sound shitty. But it is true that this is a pretty landmark moment for hardcore or metalcore. In addition to the power Knocked Loose create here, the band really made strident efforts to innovate on their sound, and I think it's absolutely paid off. Stuff like the opener Thirst recalls Code Orange with its brief bursts of lead guitar parts that disintegrate like feedback, and Suffocate not only brings in an outsider, the YouTuber turned metalhead Poppy no less, but is also rhythmically based around like a Latin reggaeton style beat. And this experimentation with rhythm and percussion is also featured on late album favorites like The Calm That Keeps You Awake as well, which adds a really nice texture to that chaotic track. It's a punishing listen for not all of the right reasons sometimes in my opinion, but for sure Knocked Loose pushed the boundaries of what a group can achieve, even when they're maybe pigeonholed into the tight corner of a genre that is like beat down hardcore. You should check this one out. Another band that I gave a bit of shit in my review for production, in this case burying the bass, is High on Fire, who returned this year with Cometh the Storm. If you want to understand what this thing sounds like before putting it on, look no further than that album cover, but put yourself in that brutally hot, arid landscape being absolutely ground down through constant, relentless sandblasting while being lit up by bolts of lightning, and you've got a bit of an idea just what this record sounds like. Though they may have got that mainstream Grammy recognition, and I might have gotten a bit older, High on Fire are no less fearsome on this record, pretty much straight from the off and concluding an hour later. If you like sludge metal and you like it heavy, you'll be pleased with the record, I've got absolutely no doubt. Some of my favorites include Burning Down, which has a completely hypnotic rhythm guitar coursing through it, the power of which only becomes more and more pronounced as the song goes on, particularly in the guitar solo. Lightning Beard probably has my favorite riff on the entire record. It cranks things up a couple of notches tempo wise, and the drums are just so in the pocket, hitting absolutely every corner and crease of that central guitar part. They just go hard. The drums sound absolutely thunderous throughout this record, and Matt Pike's bellows are classically epic. This is an album that rattles the brain while it's on, and it feels so good. Keeping it heavy, I also want to give a bit of recognition to relative newcomers in the hardcore world, Speed, with their debut Only One Mode. This record has bangers and is tons of fun. It's by no means light-hearted or happy-go-lucky, but you can't help but smile at hearing a band shout their own name before going off with chuggy riff upon chuggy riff. Favorite tracks include the absolute banger that is Don't Need. I'm not much of a pit guy, but the tempo of that one is practically designed to draw you towards a circle pit. Only Foes gets the adrenaline going with furious drum fill after furious drum fill, taking you to jaw-shattering haymaker power chords. In contrast to Knocked Loose, Speed have managed to keep some depth, I think, and character to their guitar tones at this level of aggression. Certainly, there are far heavier bands, but on those albums, like Knocked Loose, for example, it's not the heaviness, but the overly fried guitar tones that bum me out. And here on a track like Real Life Love, For instance, you can really chew on those fat guitar tones as they chug up and down the neck. If hardcore is your thing, whip your top off, put this on, run full speed into the nearest person. There's only one mode. X are one of the original LA punk bands, formed way back in 1977, and this year they announced that Smoke and Fiction is going to be their last ever record. I was surprised and a little disappointed, mainly because for a band called X, ending on their 9th record and not making it to 10 seems like a bit of a misnaming opportunity. But immediately from the moment this record starts with Ruby Church, you hear how wound tight, spring-loaded, and ready to jump out of the box this band are. I have to give credit to drummer DJ Bonebreak, because on Alphabet Land from a few years ago and now on this, he is once again hitting that stiff up-tempo groove and really creating a momentum that would probably put some youngsters to shame. This guy's up there in his 60s. Ruby Church, Sweet Till the Bitter End, Winding Up Time, and the cathartic melancholy of Big Black X. This is a remarkably strong showing for a band 45 years into it, and a great way to cap their career. Not quite as good as Alphabet Land for me from a couple of years back, but a banger nonetheless. This record was probably the last one to get added to my list this year. I only just caught up to it and it completely surprised me. When I listened to Chat Pile, it was a few years ago, and I think it was that time Fantano gave them album of the year or close to it, and I tried it a bunch of times, it just wasn't into it. And I'm not sure really what's changed, whether it's me or them, but I love this record. I've definitely found myself getting more and more into post-hardcore and noise rock the last year or so, so maybe they've just kind of found me at the right time. Cool World is absolutely punishing, from the pummeling riff of Opener I Am Dog Now to the heavy swing of Mask. I think with a bit more time to take it in, this might have even actually found its way onto my top 50 of the year list. But if you're a noise rock fan, you're going to see a lot of albums on there that will make you happy. And number one of my rock honourable mentions, I'm going to put the latest from Annie Clark, All Born Screaming. This took quite a while for me to warm up to, and some of the pacing is potentially what's prevented me from kind of placing it on the main top 50 list, but the album is undoubtedly is still brilliant. The themes of loss, physical loss, emotional loss, and disassociation are prevalent throughout this record, with Clark invoking biblical, historical, and modern references, from allusions to the Tale of Samson to the lovers of Pompeii fixed together in hardened ash, to name-checking electronic artist Sophie and political cartoonist Daniel Sotomayor. Musically, tracks like Broken Man hit a very robotic, very St. Vincent synth-based groove, but use dynamics phenomenally to like shatter this status quo, whether it's massive crunchy chords or even getting Dave Grohl behind the drum kit. Big Time Nothing touches on a bit of Prince, and Violent Times is a track that should put Annie Clark front of the queue for the next James Bond theme. It sounds so good. Like I say, this one took me a while. I immediately loved the chewy, funky center of this record, but the bookends took some time just due to that pacing and that sequencing. Eventually, though, I got there, and it deserves its spot here, even if it's not making that top 50. All right, so there you go. Those are my top 10 rock honorable mentions of 2024. Don't forget to come back for the main top 50 albums of the year hitting in just a few days' time. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Check out all the playlists and other reviews linked in the description. Other than that, mind how you go, mate. Take care. Cheers then. Bye-bye.